Hello and welcome. If you've checked out my video catalog, you've probably noticed that things kind of go here and there. I have book reviews, I have a few nature clips, and some cat videos in between, and it just doesn't seem to go anywhere in a straight line. And sorry, but that's just the way it seems to go in my world. There's different things that I've had planned, something happens, and then off we go on another tangent, which is why, if you've seen some of my other videos, I also have notes when I make them so that I can remember to cover the points that I wanted, but to try and keep me on some kind of track so that, unlike other videos, I don't have to chop and put things in a different order because I said them in the wrong place. Anyway, in March, the plan was to originally get focused on energy work and healing modalities and talk about crystals. So, for example, I'm wearing my rose quartz, which is love, and I'm also wearing my hematite, which helps with the arthritis and pain. But in March, I ended up rereading the Da Vinci Code. I was taking a bit of a break as I typically read a lot of nonfiction, but every now and then I throw some fiction into the mix just to kind of take a break for a little bit. I did have the Da Vinci Code on my to read list because I am trying to get through my personal library. And as you can see behind me, that's one of my several bookcases. So it's a goal that's going to take me several more years to finish. Part of that's because I keep going to the library and finding other reads. Also, I'm getting some great suggestions from people, so those get added onto my reading list as well. And I'm okay with that because I'm really enjoying this journey of different topics, different subjects. Back to the Da Vinci Code. So the spiral began when I realized that it wasn't just reading the Da Vinci Code. I had a book called The Secrets of the Code that had been waiting for years. And as I read that, I also realized I had books on the Templars, I had information on the Freemasons. Then I started making the tie-in back to ancient Egypt and how all of that connected in. Ended up getting copies of the Bible. That list continues to grow. I have the files ready and waiting. I have binders finally organized and my cart set up. I just need to get back to the Da Vinci Code, start going through making the notes, and then go through the books I've already read and start making all of those connections. Because it's quite interesting how they all tie in and all the different information that comes from them and how that all spirals out to my other interests as well. The energy healing books and crystals have been put on the side for quite some time. It's now September 2023. In a few days, it will be October. I have my plans for October set up to help keep me on track. I've done everything on a calendar. I set that up yesterday. And it may now be possibly February before I get to talking about the different energy healing books, the different training that I've had over the years, and then move on to crystals as well. I decided that February may be a really good time to go through those topics because a lot of people tend to feel down, and here in Ontario, we're getting into winter. We have the cloudy days. People are looking forward to spring coming. It's a good time to talk about some uplifting strategies and different things to do. In terms of October, as I said, I already have it planned out. I have a video about the different books that I'll be talking about during that time. I'm wearing my Stargate shirt today. Last night I had watched an episode on Prime about ghosts and spirits. It was interesting, and it was a bit of a chuckle, as a number of the different clips that they showed on that program I've actually seen either on top 5 channels, or a couple of them have been debunked. So what a small world indeed, and I guess there really aren't that many clips out there. It was an interesting episode because it will also tie in with the George Newry book of Worker in the Light, where he talks about remote viewing, talk about a program that was called Stargate, not the one where they go through and find different civilizations where, isn't it great, everybody in the universe speaks English. The name of the program for remote viewing was called Stargate, which is rather interesting, and that will be a whole video in itself. There is a lot of different material that I'll be covering. It's part of the reason I decided, for the first time since I've been doing this, to write all the titles out and plan when I'm going to be airing them or uploading them. So I have some books that I need to review, make some notes on, and get prepared for that. There's a few videos that I'll be doing some updates and remakes, because when I first did them way back, the background was much different, my editing was much different. So hopefully now they'll have a much better quality to them and be more interesting. During September, I read Bellwether, which was a recommendation by one of my viewers, Timothy Collins, and I do appreciate that. It was an excellent read, and again, I just needed to take a bit of a break from all the nonfiction that I'd been reading and trying to process. And it was a science fiction book that I very much enjoyed reading, and I'm glad that my library had a copy of it. It talks about chaos theory, which I've never looked into, so I have a whole new subject area to go and explore. And it was fascinating because every chapter in the book starts with a different trend. So it could be about different hairstyles, different games like the Rubik's Cube, etc. It made the book that much more interesting to read because there were things that I didn't know, certainly the years that some of these things were deemed popular, and the fact that some of them are still very much around and popular. I'll talk more about that specifically when I do a review on Bellwether. That will be in November, and yes, I have that planned already. The funny thing is, I had planned to get back to my other reading and get that on track. In September, I also decided to go get a new laptop, which happens to be my anniversary present, as my husband and I will be celebrating 36 years on the 3rd of October. So that's pretty cool. While I was at the store looking and picking out my laptop, we ended up having this wonderful person come to help us out. His name was Colin, and it was great meeting him. He knew his stuff, very helpful, figured out which laptop I was getting. Then we started talking about YouTube and different books. He also enjoys reading. He recommended The Terror, a book about the Franklin expedition. And as it turns out, Prime also has a series based on the book. It's also called The Terror. Again, it was great. My library had a copy of the book, so I read the book while I was watching the series, which was kind of neat. I've never actually done that before. And it was great to see what was the same in the book and what was different. I have to say, I very much preferred the book. It goes into obviously more detail with different descriptions. It's more realistic because obviously to try and film some of this stuff, and the temperatures and what have you would be different. But I definitely prefer the ending in the book. If you've read The Terror or watched the series, let me know in the comments down below. The other reason I enjoyed the book is the map provided at the beginning. It was helpful as you're reading the book and it's talking about the different areas that they've moved after the ships were locked in by the ice. So I referred back to it several times as I was reading the story because it gave you an idea of where they were and what else was around. At the back of the book, Dan Simmons, the author, I don't think I've said his name yet, refers to all the different resources he looked at and read before writing The Terror. One of the books that he mentions is Frozen in Time, The Fate of the Franklin Expedition by Owen Beatty and John Geiger. I hope I'm saying that right. And that was published in 1987. I remember reading that book, so I knew a little bit about the Franklin expedition. That book stands out because the copy that I had, the picture on the front of it was one of the graves that they found. And watching the series, when one of the men dies, when they're burying him, it's exactly the same image from that book. Reading this has now again made me curious about the Franklin expedition. I've recently learned, thanks to my husband Googling things, because he does that sometimes, the HMS Erebus and the HMS Terror have just recently been found. The Erebus was found in 2014 and the Terror wasn't found until 2016. So the book that I read, Frozen in Time from 1987, was obviously a big speculation about what happened and where the ships even were, because they weren't found for a number of years afterwards. There's a website now, and I'll leave the link down below, where you can find out more information about the Franklin expedition if you're interested in searching that out. Now that I've read The Terror, I'm curious about the Franklin expedition and learning a bit more about that. I also realized that they're never going to 100% know what happened, how the ships ended up getting locked in there. I do know part of the problem was, unfortunately, the canned goods that they took, keeping in mind the back of the Terror says, the men on board the HMS Terror, part of the ill-fated 1845 Franklin expedition, are entering a second summer in the Arctic Circle without a thaw, stranded in a nightmarish landscape of ice and desolation. Endlessly cold, they struggle to survive with poisonous rations and a dwindling coal supply. But their real enemy is even more terrifying. There's something out there in the frigid darkness, an unseen predator stalking their ship. A monstrous terror clawing to get in. Now, of course, The Terror is a work of fiction. I enjoyed the read. It's historical fiction, so Dan Simmons has combined the different ideas and theories about what were happening with the Franklin expedition, combined with facts and what we do know about when they had left England and the amount of rations and things that they had. With it being 1845, there were things they didn't know about tin goods and sealing cans the same way that they know about them now. So unfortunately, although the expedition left with 3 years' worth of supplies, and again, you have to keep in mind, back in that era, there were not maps like we have today. They were trying to find the Northwest Passage through, so much of this area was still unexplored and unknown. They didn't have cell phones or all these satellites that we have all around the planet now. Once they left Greenland, and after the whaling ship, which is the last one that ever saw them, went their separate ways, there was no way to communicate with anyone to let them know what was going on. They didn't have things like the Weather Channel, etc. So a lot of this, and you have to give them credit for the courage of going out there without any way of communicating back. And again, they had 3 years worth of rations. So even had something happened sooner than it did, there would have been no way for them to get in touch with anyone to get some help or let them know. Although the doctors were realizing, according to this book, that there was something wrong with the food. And I believe even in the other book that I read that came up. The tins were not sealed properly. Some of the food was not prepared properly. So yes, according to what people knew in England, they had all these supplies. What they didn't know is that their food was going bad. And there were, of course, hundreds of men. They were up in the Arctic, so it's not like they could just go hop to store and resupply type of thing. So there are a lot of different factors to keep in mind with what happened in regard to the Terror and the Erebus. 2 other books that I'll be reading in the next couple of weeks. One is Trapped in Terror Bay, Solving the Mystery of the Lost Franklin Expedition. This is by Sigmund Bauer, a map at the front, which is always helpful. This is actually published in 2022. So I'm very much interested in reading through this because the ships have already been discovered. And just taking a quick peek through, yep, they have a picture of the Terror's wheel. Shortly after the discovery in Terror Bay, the Parks Canada underwater archaeology team arrived to scan the wreck, examine the historical and archaeological evidence, and scientifically confirm its identity. The side-scan sonar image of HMS Terror shows the details of the bowsprit, mass, and placement of the helm. Okay, great. So there's going to be a lot of up-to-date information here. And each chapter starts with a timeline of what was going on. And there's maps that show different things. So I'll be definitely talking more about that in an upcoming video when I do the Franklin expedition. Another book that I got from the library is Ice Ghosts, The Epic Hunt for the Lost Franklin Expedition. That's by Paul Watson. And this is 2017. So again, after the ships have both been found. So these are a more up-to-date take on what they believe happened to the ships. So there's part of my library off the plan. Another book that I hadn't been planning on reading, I did plan to read The 10th Insight again as I'm wanting to redo my Celestine Prophecy video. What I didn't realize when I started that search is that there's actually a 12th insight. I had read the 11th a number of years ago. I hadn't read the 10th in probably over 15 years or so, and I wanted to give that another visit. So the Celestine Prophecy series are another great way of not just looking at how you move through the world and how your thoughts and your energy impact other people. It's also interesting to read about different locations. The Celestine Prophecy is between the United States and Peru. The 10th Insight is the United States. The 11th Insight is China. And the 12th insight involves the United States and Egypt. So you get to travel around, learn about a bit about different countries, different things going on with governments, appreciate that each government does things differently. There's different conspiracy things that come up in these books in terms of there's information out there, there's bits and pieces that come out at a time. And there are certain people and organizations who, of course, don't want this information to come out. The 12th insight was a timely find and, oddly enough, a timely arrival in my hands. I had actually put this on hold with a number of other books. The other books all arrived several weeks ago, and I've since read them, The 10th Insight, The Terror, etc. This book, however, took a little while to arrive because someone else was reading it, and so when it was returned, then it came through to me. And I don't think it was an accident, one, because it rarely happens with the different books that I put on hold. So this arrived when it was meant to, and I'll talk a bit more about that when I get to the Fifth Mountain, because I thought I had the Fifth Mountain on hold before. It turns out I didn't. Putting it on hold, when I checked my account and realized I didn't have The Fifth Mountain by Paulo on hold, I put it on hold. The interesting thing is, these both arrived at the library at the same time for me to pick up. But on the inside cover of the 12th Insight, the books of James Redfield have been passed down from reader to reader, friend to friend, for nearly 20 years. Millions upon millions have embraced the spiritual insights revealed in the Celestine Prophecy, the 10th Insight, the Secret of Shambhala, and the Celestine Vision, opening themselves up to the intense power of synchronicity and spiritual purpose. Now, at a time when political corruption and financial instability are growing, and global religious tensions are threatening to enter a nuclear phase, James Redfield builds upon his earlier insights, launching a spiritual adventure that will transform all who take the journey. That caught my attention considering events in 2023. So we again have so many different things going on with governments, people with so many different ideas, unrest, not just in terms of religious or spiritual beliefs. There's sadly so many issues of racism, which is just mind-boggling as it's 2023. Why people cannot seem to process that it doesn't matter what color your skin is. It doesn't matter where you're born. We're all human beings, interconnected, on the same planet. Yeah, just, I don't understand it. There's that connection there. People are people are people. It should, quite frankly, be that simple. On the other hand, there are people who enjoy drama, fear-mongering, promoting hatred. There are other people who want to join up with that type of energy and focus. And sadly, while that continues, there's always going to be those two different camps of the people who get it and the people who don't. The other part of the inside cover that definitely grabbed my attention as I started reading this the other day. In the 12th Insight, we again follow our hero and his close friend, Will. They've just received a portion of another ancient and mysterious manuscript that describes a secret approach to spirituality that is silently arriving in the second decade of the 21st century. But the manuscript is only available in fragments. This was published in 2011, the second decade of the 21st century, and here we are in 2023. This is why I enjoy reading older books. This isn't history, it's a parable, so he's coming up with different ideas and how people would interact. And now here we are in 2023, and keeping in mind, I don't watch the news. To me, it's just a lot of fear mongering, and they don't focus enough on what's going right. They're forever focusing on what's going wrong. So I just typically tend to avoid it as much as possible. Having said that, every now and again, I'll watch a news bite on YouTube. So maybe the headline will catch my attention, or it's something that I'm aware of that's happening. And so I just check in to see where the current mindset is. Events in this book definitely could be happening right now in terms of, as I said earlier, different things the government does. You have people who have their different ideas and theories. So really the goal is to try and find people of like mind. And again, like mind does not mean agree with everything you say. It means people who you can have a mature, open discussion with, and you can agree to disagree. The more that people can speak openly and focus on being positive and focus on making this world a better place for everyone, the better it is. That's just my biased opinion. As I said, I'll talk more about the 12th insight, the hour of decision, in an upcoming video when I review the Celestine Prophecy as a series and update that information. The Fifth Mountain by Paulo Coelho is a novel that I thought I had put on hold before, which I didn't. And yes, I'm aware that some people may not think of some of this stuff. It's the way I process things in my world. In the 12th insight, our hero, as he's referred to, sees crows in the beginning of the book, and the crows come up later. As I've mentioned before, I also follow animal guides. I'll be talking about Ted Andrews and Animal Speak and his other book, Nature Speak, in an upcoming video. So, crows come up in the 12th insight, come up for me in my area, and to me, when I see a crow, it's a reminder about sacred laws. And again, when you're working with animal guides, it's not just, oh, every time you see that animal, there's something there. It's focusing on what were your thoughts before you saw the animal? Did you have a question for the universe? And is that animal telling you something? So, for example, I do have crows in my area, but I don't always hear them. I don't always see them. I've years ago asked for a sign about something with crows. They don't typically land in my yard, and yet on this day, within an hour, 3 of them landed in one of my trees. So I had my answer. And I get other people will be saying, oh, it's just a coincidence, what have you. And it might be. But the simple reality is, since that particular day, the crows have never landed in my trees again. So to me, that's significant. And that's important to remember when you are working with animal guides. It's a combination of what were your thoughts? Where are you seeing this particular animal? And it can be a bird, an insect, an animal. There's so many different signs that nature gives us. You just need to be aware and mindful. In the Fifth Mountain, crows are mentioned again. So to me, it becomes a question of what are the odds that, first off, this book I had to wait for, it mentions crows. I finished reading this, and yesterday I was trying to decide what was I going to read next. Would I get back to my cube of books, and I have at least 6 or 7 with bookmarks in them waiting to be finished, or do I start something new? And I decided to start something new, and boom, there's a comment about crows that he sees significant to his story. So to me, it was kind of a aha, meant to read it moment. I'll talk more about the fifth, well, first, I need to finish reading The Fifth Mountain, and then I'll talk more about that in an upcoming video when I review several of Paulo's other books. Just like I mentioned in The Alchemist, the copy of this book also has an edition in the back. So we have a section about meeting the author. There's about the book. So if you wanted to do this in a book club, which is how I discovered The Alchemist, there are questions that you can use. Then there's also a section in the back, and I'll have to be sure to get through this before I return the book. It goes through all of Paulo's books and gives you a summary of what those stories are about. So there are a number of his other books that I'd like to check out, and now I have a detailed description to know what they talk about. As I started this book yesterday, what really struck me, not just as I got farther in the crows, but in the beginning we have note from the author. In my book, The Alchemist, the central thesis lies in a phrase that King Melchizedek says to the shepherd boy, Santiago. When you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it. I believe this with all my heart. However, the act of living one's own destiny includes a series of stages that are far beyond our understanding, whose objective is always to take us back to the path of our personal legend, or to make us learn the lessons necessary to fulfill our own destiny. And for me, that was a boom moment. Partly because, and I've mentioned this before, in my school grief video, I talk about the last 6 years and different events. And there's still that big question of what am I meant to do? Is YouTube what I'm supposed to be spending my time on? Should I be trying to find some other kind of work? What am I meant to do? And quite frankly, why am I still here? And I don't mean that in a negative sense. It's when I was working full time, I always had purpose. I always knew what I was meant to do, whether I was a caseworker and working with clients, or I was an educational assistant and working with students. I had a purpose. And in the last few years, I know my purpose was with my fur kids, certainly as two of them had cancer. So my purpose was taking care of them and our other 4 and the transitions as we had to say goodbye. And then when that happened and my house went from 6 fur babies to 2 fur babies, I knew my purpose was still with them, and of course, taking care of my yard and all of that and what have you. My business went down the tubes, and again, that's fine. There's a lot of other good things that have spiraled from it, but I'm still in that, why am I still here? What has this all been leading to? And again, I don't know whether YouTube is the answer, but for now, as I've said before, it's what gets me out of bed. I stick with it until the universe either gives me a major kick in the ass and points me in some other direction, or things really start taking off here on YouTube and I get some affirmation that this is what I'm meant to do. And I partly have some of that affirmation, and if you're watching this and you're one of my 36 returning viewers, thank you so much for sharing your time with me, because I truly do appreciate it, and I hope you're enjoying the video and there are some things that you find of interest or benefit. If so, by all means, let me know in the comments down below. I very much enjoy reading them. I'm always looking for suggestions, so be sure to leave a comment down below. Back on track, and see, this is why I have notes. We go boop, boop, boop. You're kind of stuck listening to me without being able to jump in and pull me back on track. So the fifth mountain, again, there's synchronicity. It ties in with the 12th insight. I'm looking forward to finishing this read. I've enjoyed the start of it, and this is, like The Alchemist, a novel. The other book, Aleph, is also a novel that relates to the burning times, what some people call the Inquisition, and it talks about past life and meeting people in this life to complete or do things differently. Because karma, contrary to what some people will say or seem to interpret it as, is not punishment. Karma is life lessons and learning to make different choices and doing things differently, if you choose. If not, and there's a saying, what you resist persists. In other words, if you keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again, life is going to keep setting up that scenario until you make a different choice. Whether that's to respond differently, whether that's to ignore the situation if that's what you're meant to do, whether it's finding a way to make peace with someone you didn't think you could. Life is a school, and a lot of people tend to miss that. Once you graduate that formal sit in a classroom with someone at the front of the room, it doesn't mean learning ends. We're always learning about relationships, about new discoveries in science, about subjects we didn't know about before. So, for example, me with bellwether. Chaos theory is something new to learn about. I had a comment the other day about an asteroid. So now I've checked out the NASA website and I want to get back into astronomy, as I've said in a previous video. So that's a perfect segue into getting down into that subject. Yes, I know. It would be awesome if I could afford a personal assistant and he or she could get me on track and help me get some of this stuff done, because there's just so many things that I want to check out. And that comes up with the book Refuse to Choose, which likely will be either December, January, I'm not sure. And because I really need to go through and make some notes, there's a lot of great information that I want to share there. If you're a scanner, you'll definitely understand me here, there, and everywhere. And if you have some ADHD tendencies, as do I spent decades working with students who were labeled ADHD. And it has to do with your attention span. It has to do with when there is something of interest to you, you can definitely focus on that and zone everything out. It's also to do with, you notice my hands are moving, my feet are forever moving. You just need to keep busy. Sitting still just isn't something that we do well. And that's okay. There's lots, and like I told my students who'd say, oh, well, I have this. And I said, congratulations. I have a full-time job. So that's not an excuse to not be able to move forward and do something with your life. So let's just put that to the side and figure out how can we get you on that stage with your diploma finishing grade 12. And I'm grateful that so many of them did, and that I got to enjoy part of the journey with them, because it was an amazing job. Again, back to the fifth mountain. I'm definitely looking forward to finding out what happens with Elijah. In this case, Elijah has fled Israel. There are a lot of things going on. The prophets are being killed by Jezebel. And interestingly enough, again, here we are back to issues in the Bible, which will relate back to my different readings with Zachariah Sitchin because is tied into events in the Bible. That's all going to come back to the Da Vinci Code. So I guess in a way, without even planning on it, here I am back to the Bible and ancient Egypt and all of those different events. So I get that for some people, it doesn't make sense how things may interconnect or what on earth is she talking about. I've just learned that throughout my life, there's ebb and flow. Things go really well. You hit a dip in the road. You get back up. When I'm focused on the Celestine prophecy and my personal energy and what I'm putting out and what I'm getting in from the universe, which is why I do things like white light, or I wear certain things that help with keeping my energy clear. I have a spritzer that I'll talk about in an upcoming video called Aura Cleanse. So there are lots of things that I do in terms of keeping my energy high, being self-aware, and just trying to make things better, not just for myself, for my kids, but for the world at large. And hope, everything that we do has an impact and a ripple effect. So why not make it for the better? That's a little bit of my recent library pickups, where my reading's been going, and how I tend to get off track. If you're still here, thanks so much for continuing to watch and listen to me travel here and travel there and talk about books and other things. Starting next week, we get into the October plan of ghosts, vampires, and of course, when I get to H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, aliens, and how that all plays out. If you enjoyed this video and found some of it to be of value or of interest, or there's a book subject that you're now interested in checking out, let me know in the comments down below. Be sure to give that like button a little tickle, as both of those things help my channel continue to grow and gets me out there on that YouTube algorithm so that other people of like mind can find the channel and join the conversation. Content here is varied, so be sure to click on that subscribe button. I think it's probably going to be here, and turn on the notification bell so you know when I upload content that may be of interest to you. Until next time, happy wandering.